Okay, welcome everyone to the January 17th public hearing, the first public hearing of 2017 and my first as your mayor. Happy to see you all here and look forward to hearing your testimony. And before we begin, we want to take just a few moments to remember Andrea Ortiz, who was a city council member on this council for 2 terms, almost 2 terms, and we'll begin. I'm going to open the floor a little bit for councilors to each share a minute of remembrance about former Councilman Ortiz, and then we'll have a moment of silence, and then we'll go on with the planned hearing. So, councilors, Alan?
Yeah, I had the privilege of working with Andrea Ortiz for about 4 years when I first got on the council, and she helped me learn the ropes. And I admired her passion and caring about people. She worked very, very hard to make sure people were treated with equity and respect and dignity in her work on the council and her work as a professional. And I think Eugene is a better place for her, having been on the council. I considered her a friend and a colleague, and I will miss her.
There.
Thank you. So Andrea was the counselor for Ward 7, as many of you know, and when she decided after she won her May primary that she didn't actually wish to serve any longer, she recruited me to run for her seat. And when I turned out to be the only person who filled out the paperwork and got the signatures and filed for the seat, she then vacated her seat early, and I was sworn in her place. So I never got to work with Andrea as a fellow counselor, but certainly I owe her a huge debt of gratitude for her confidence in me, because I know she took this work very seriously and she cared deeply about this community and the people in it. And so I'm very grateful to her and very sad at losing her so young, and hope that I can meet her expectations wherever she may be now.
Councilor Pryor?
Thank you. Andrea and I were both elected at the same time, and so we went through a period from the primary to the final election and then being sworn in where we were being oriented towards the city, and we spent a lot of time together. And very early on, Andrea and I, and actually the former mayor, sat down and said, what can we do to try to create the most productive, collegial, and effective city council that we can? And concluded that really modeling the kind of behavior that you want from a well-functioning body was a very important thing to do. And what I always admired about Andrea was she never lacked for passion. Any of us who were here at the same time as her know that she had an enormous amount of passion, but that passion was always focused on the best outcome for the issue. And she never really let that passion become about the person, which is what can create divisiveness. And I always thought that you don't have to compromise your passion in order to be a productive body. And I think Andrea really demonstrated that ability.
Councilor Evans?
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't get the opportunity to serve with Andrea on this body, but I worked with her quite a bit before I came to this body in a variety of capacities. I'll note that she was the first Latina city councilor. She, served extremely well and admirably in that role. I worked with her even before she came on council in various capacities when I was on the LTD board. Prior to that, when she was a school board member in the Bethel School District, and she served, admirably in that role as well. And I'll echo the sentiments of the other councilors who said it. It was her passion, her compassion, and her, concern for the well-being of all of her community. But she particularly served the underserved in our community extremely well. And she was a voice for people who didn't have a voice or had limited voice in our community. And I will always admire and remember her for being that advocate for the person that stood up for, as the pejorative is, they say the little man or the little person. But for the people who did not, we're not able to speak up, we're not able to come to these forums, she spoke for them and spoke well for them. And I will note one other thing. Her ward and Councilor Syrette's ward, not just the Whitaker neighborhood, it's also Train Song and Roosevelt, and that's where she lived and that's where she made her investment. And we'll really miss her.
Thank you. George?
Yeah, first of all, Glenn and I would like to extend our, it's tough, our prayers and wishes to Andrea's family, her husband, her boys, her 4 sisters. Andrea was a special lady. The rest of the counselors have pretty much said it. She had a lot of compassion, but she also had a sense of humor that you had to really listen for to catch, and she was quick with it. Andrea and I were basically on different sides of the political spectrum, and I had a real good time getting to know Andrea, and it was apparent to me early on that she wasn't afraid to step outside the box and not necessarily go down, quote, the party line. A good example of that, and all the credit to Andrea for doing this, is over the years, we continually saw money being drawn out of the Facility Reserve Fund, which is basically a kind of a one-time money, and was put into ongoing services. Andrew one day came to me and says, I'm thinking about putting a motion out to spend the Facility Reserve Fund to go find a police department. Will you back me? And I said, you betcha. And despite some of the negative comments she received for that thinking, it was an investment well made. She was also the first counselor that came to me several years ago after I stopped a meeting that was not in compliance with the Oregon meeting laws. And as a result, I suffered some criminal activity by some miscreants in criminal types at my house. And she came to me and, I tried to bring it to people's attention that all I did was stop a meeting that wasn't called according to the public meeting laws. She was the only counselor that came to me and said, you were right in stopping that meeting. That meeting was not lawfully called. Again, she was not afraid to step out away from her people to bring up the points that were best for the community, and that was the right thing to do. Andrea will be greatly missed, and like I said, my wife and I extend our sincere sympathy to her family.
Thank you. Thank you all. I think we'll just take a few moments to moment of silence. Councilor Clark, excuse me. Would you have something to say?
I do. My voice isn't working very well, so it'll be brief. I just wanted to say that I was very sad to hear of Andrea's passing as well, and certainly my condolences to her family. I got the privilege to serve with her as well for many years. And I always saw Andrea as a fierce, passionate warrior for the issues she believed in and for her constituents and for the people that she felt compelled to speak for. And it was an honor to work with her. She taught me a couple of things and how to look at issues from a different perspective in a way that's been very helpful to me. And I agree with Alan that I think our city was very well served to have the honor of her service for the years that she did, and I will miss her.
Thank you. Thank you all for those thoughts, and we'll just have a moment of silence here and thank her for her life and her service and her gift to all of us. Thank you. Thank you all for that observance. And now we will begin the scheduled public hearing. I want to just remind everyone that we continue with the courtesy rules that have been in place under my predecessor, Mayor Piercy, and ask that you hold applause or verbal comment of any sort, support or in opposition to people who are speaking. We want this to be a safe and respectful place for everyone who takes the time and has the courage to stand up and testify at these times. And we'll just follow that rule so that everyone feels comfortable saying what they need to say. So we'll begin. The first item on our public hearing is a resolution granting a Measure 49 claim and waiving a provision. And I guess I turn this over to City Manager. There we go.
If you'd like to, Mayor, what I can do is just give a kind of a brief outline so people that are in the audience will know what the particular public hearing is about. So this item is a public hearing on a Measure 49 claim submitted by Chad and Katie Wilson for the alleged reduction in fair market value to their property, which is located at 1777 East 30th Avenue, due to the city's adoption of a land use regulation that prevents them from converting an existing residence into a secondary dwelling. Measure 49 claims are authorized and required by state law. Following the testimony tonight, the city attorney will advise you on next steps, including the possibility of keeping the record open to allow for additional testimony and evidence. Following the close of the hearing record, a work session will be scheduled to discuss testimony and answer any questions you may have. And my recommendation will be provided in advance of council action, which must occur prior to April 1st of 2017.
Thank you. And our first presenter is, I opened the public hearing. Our first presenter is Carolyn Jacobs, followed by Bill Aspegren.
Carolyn Jacobs, Ward 3. The Measure 49 ordinance requires a demonstrated restriction of the residential use of the property in question. In this case, the residential use was in no way whatsoever affected by any citywide or area-specific 2014 R1 code amendments. Prior to 2014, the property in question was a large lot with a very small residential unit over an accessory shop. That's all. While it was large enough to have an SDU, it did not have one. Since the existing structure was the only structure on the property, it could not, by definition, have been an SDU, nor did it even meet the 800 square foot code limitation. After 2014, the potential use of the property was unchanged. It could have included both a primary unit or a primary house and an SDU. But to be clear, the existing building never was an SDU, never met the standards for an SDU, and would not meet the standards today. The option to modify it to bring it into SDU compliance and build a new house, or to call it the primary house and build an SDU, was there before 2014, and it's still there. Despite failing to demonstrate restricted use, the claim includes some very questionable appraisals. For example, the original appraisals were later resubmitted with the dates changed, but no changes in the appraised value, no explanation. One property wasn't even in the R1, one was outside the UGB, and curiously, none of them were similarly large lots with small residences. Also, the failure to take into account the many market trends at play alone should invalidate any conclusion as to causes of fluctuations in a property's value. It's also highly unusual to base the claimant's pre- and post-property values on hypothetical primary residences and hypothetical SDUs. Common practice would assume values based on existing structures. Lastly, this Measure 49 claim points to the area-specific code amendments for Fairmount, Amazon, and South University neighborhoods as the cause of the loss in value, when in fact the citywide code amendments would also make the structure non-compliant. All amendments set an 800 square foot maximum for SDUs. Citywide code does not permit an additional 7 feet of height for steep roofs, which leaves this property seriously over the limit. And while an adjustment to allow for an SDU over an accessory unit is in the citywide standards, 9.803034 limits the building to only 600 feet and only 15 feet in height. So for failing to prove usage restrictions, for failure to provide legitimate appraisals, for failure to prove a reduction in property value, and for setting a very problematic precedent, this claim should be denied. I'd also like to request that this record remain open for a few weeks. Okay.
Thank you. Bill Aspergren, followed by Janet Ayers.
Hi, I'm Bill Aspergren. I'm in the Alan Zelenka's ward, Ward 3. I submitted testimony that's in your packet and hope you will read it in detail. In that testimony, I pointed out why the Measure 49 claim does not have merit and should be rejected. Allowing this claim, especially since it doesn't have merit, sets a troubling precedent that will have consequences for almost any code changes in the future. To quickly recap some of my testimony, the existing structure at 1777 East 30th Avenue was built in 2004 and could not have been a legal SDU at that time before the R1 changes went in, or later, after the R1 changes were actually implemented. The appraisals start off making a wrong assumption that the structure could be a legal SDU prior to the R1 changes. In addition, there are numerous other problems with the appraisals, which I discuss in my testimony. In a letter from the city to Wilson's attorney dated April 20th, 2016, it stated, under staff review, it appears that the primary residential use and a secondary dwelling were allowed under the previous regulation and that the same uses are allowed under the ordinance number 20526, the R1 changes. A major 49 claim requires that the regulation restricts the residential use of the property. Since the primary dwelling and the SDU could have been built both before and after the R1 code changes, the regulation did not restrict the Wilson's use of the residential use. The April 20th letter is not in your packet, so I'll give a copy over to the city manager when I'm done here. There have been discussions with Mr. Wilson about finding alternatives that will allow him to have a rental and new home without making an exception to the code. Partitioning the lot seems to be the best approach. I would like to see that the record is left open for a minimum of 2 weeks for the Wilsons to work with the city on finding and investigating alternatives. However, even if there is no alternative solution, the Measure 49 claim should not be approved. I urge you to reject the claim. Thanks.
Thank you. Janet Ayers, followed by John Borofsky.
Be very brief. I support what the fellow said. I wasn't real well versed in this, but I strongly advocate property rights for the homeowner, and I see no merit in imposing the Measure 49 on the property owner.
Thank you. John Borofsky.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council, City Manager, and staff. My name is John Borowski. I live in Ward 3, and I'm here representing the Fairmont Neighbors Board. We are here to testify to the Measure 49 claim for compensation. The property in question at 1777 East 30th Avenue lies in the boundary of the Fairmont Neighbors. On our January 10th board meeting, held its regular scheduled meeting and discussed this claim. We had concerns that the claim of this nature would have an effect to undermine the R1 code amendments, as well as the interim protection measures that are in place for our adjacent neighborhoods. As you are aware, a lot of time and energy went into the crafting of those amendments, and we look forward to being able to work on area plans for the near university neighborhoods in the near future. With that being said, it was the conclusion of the board and in a unanimous vote that the claim before you is worth granting an exception to the code regarding height limits, setbacks, and slope. We feel that the owners are doing what they had always intended to do with the property, and that the new code is preventing them from carrying out their ultimate plan for the property. After reviewing the record, we do have concerns that the existing home that they wish to convert to an SDU does not comply with the 800 square foot maximum size. As it's stated in the record, it's slightly above the maximum at 808 square feet. When you make your decision on this matter, we hope that you will be given a briefing from the city attorney as to any ramifications that this action would have on other R1 code amendments, as well as the upcoming changes that will be coming before you with the new UGB adoption package. The 5-year clock is well underway for the 2014 amendments. However, the next set of changes starts a new 5-year clock ticking. Thank you for your consideration of this testimony. John Borowski on behalf of the Fairmont Neighbors Board.
Thank you very much. And that is the full list of the testimony. Do I close? Do I close? And the public hearing is now closed. And Glenn, do you have some information for us?
I do. A couple pieces of information and a suggestion. First, there were 2 pieces of written testimony that did come in today, and I just wanted to mention for the record. One was an email from Paul Conte, and another was a letter from the applicant's attorney, Bill Close. In his letter, Mr. Close asked that the record be left open for 14 days for the applicant to provide, in essence, the last word. Under Measure 49, the applicant is entitled to the last word. The statute does not say, Measure 49 does not say you have to give the applicant 14 days. You can choose the amount of time, but the applicant does get the last word. My suggestion for you is that you leave the record open for anybody to provide additional testimony until next Friday, January 27th at 5 p.m., and then you give the claimant an additional 7 days after that, so that would be February 3rd, the Friday afterwards, at 5 p.m. to submit any additional testimony that he wants to or they want to submit. The reason I'm not suggesting a full 2 weeks in 2 weeks is because, as the city manager said, you need to make a final decision by April 1st. You go on recess in the middle of March, and in order to have a work session before you have action, and I strongly recommend that we have a work session on this, you can't give 4 weeks before we get all the information to then schedule the work session. This is the first Measure 49 claim that the city of Eugene has had. There are a number of policy discussions that I think you may want to have, and so that's why I'm recommending a slightly shorter period of time. It would give the public 10, 11 days to submit any additional information, and then give the applicant that additional 7 days. And if you're interested in doing that, I can provide a motion if the council president needs one.
Okay. Any discussion, councilors?
Why can't the record stay open for everyone as long as it does for the applicant?
State law expressly states that the applicant gets the last word. This is similar to many of the land use proceedings where you would often close the record, you would leave the record open for a week or two for everybody, and then the applicant gets another 7 days to provide the last word. It's just because of the way the state law was written.
You suggested another 2 weeks for the applicant, didn't you?
No, the applicant requested another 2 weeks. I'm just suggesting 1 week, so that the record's left open for everybody until January 27th, and then the applicant gets until February 3rd. So the applicant would get 7 days after to respond after.
That's not quite 2 weeks, January 27th, is it?
It's not.
I move that I suggest that the applicant everybody has 2 weeks before the applicant's final week. Could we do that?
You can. It just tightens up the time frame between when we get the information and when you would be having your work session. But if you feel it's important to give everybody 2 weeks and then the applicant a week, we can figure out how to work with that.
That's what I would prefer, but I'll wait and see.
Councilor Zelenka.
So if I have this right, the Wilsons' claim is that the restriction is that in 2014, the code amendments required SDUs to be no more than 800 square feet, and there were some height restrictions, and they don't meet either of those requirements. And my understanding is the building was built in 2004, so they believe that the 14 code change unfairly restricted them because the building was predated the 2014 code. Is that the essence of it?
I would say that's the general essence of it. I can't give you the specifics. 2 reasons. One, I'm just not prepared to just go into that level of detail. I certainly will be by the time you have your work session. And then the second reason is up until, the attorney in our office who had been working on this has decided to go work for LCOG, and so I'm picking this up. And so I haven't had a chance to go through the complete record. But by the time of your work session, I will.
So when you're pondering all of that, Mr. City Attorney, can you also ponder, my understanding is that the 800 square foot restriction is actually enacted in 2002. And whether or not that applies to this circumstance, I guess, is the question. And then has anybody at the city done an independent square foot estimate of that dwelling, of that building?
Nobody has done an actual measurement of the building that I'm aware of in the city, but while the record's being left open, that will certainly be one of the things that we will nail down and provide that information before the record is closed.
Yeah, I understand that the applicant actually in one of the appraisals said it's 868 square feet or 64. I can't remember the exact number, but
something like that.
Yeah, over the 800 square foot limit. And is it also that the Measure 49 claim to be granted that what they want to do must be prohibited and that there's no other way to get around it? For instance, I own a piece of property that has about a 900 square foot house on it. And if I wanted to change it into a secondary dwelling, I could either partition the lot or change the dwelling to make it be less than 800 square feet. And therefore, then I could build in either of those instances another house. Would that be true here too, or do you have to have an absolute prohibition against the building, what they want to do in order for the Measure 49 claim to be sustained?
There needs to be a restriction on some use of the property that an appraiser is willing to say has reduced the fair market value of the property. So it doesn't have to be an absolute prohibition. It just needs to be a restriction inside city limits. It has to be residential. It's not commercial or industrial. But if it's a restriction on a use of the property that reduces the fair market value according to an appraiser, and there are standards that the appraiser has to follow, then that would give rise to the Measure 49 claim.
All right. I would also make a motion to request that the record be kept open for everybody until January 27th and for the applicant until February 3rd.
And if you can specify If you would specify that it's on those days at 5 p.m.
Oh, on those days at 5 p.m.
Do we have did you second that, Councilor Clark?
Yeah.
Betty?
I tried, Junior, yes.
Yeah.
We both did.
You both did. Okay, so you're okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, any other discussion? Wait,
Any discussion?
any other discussion on this motion?
Just,
So, so all in, we do have one.
so are we leaving the record open for everybody for 2 weeks then? Is that it?
It would be about 10 days. It would be until next Friday at 5 p.m. and then the following Friday for the applicant.
And the applicant gets 7 days then?
Under this motion, the applicant gets 7 days. You can decide it can be more than that, it can be less than that. The statute doesn't say how much time you have to leave the record open for the applicant. 7 days is the required amount of time under the quasi-judicial land use process in other state statutes. So by analogy, you could say that's a reasonable amount of time here.
Okay.
Any other comments?
And we go on council break March 16th through April 10th, so there's not much time. There's only a couple of meetings in there where we'd have time to do a work session and take action.
Correct.
Which should be probably on 2 different dates.
Yes, the dates we were tentatively looking at was, I think it's your last meeting in February for your work session, and then that Monday night in mid-March, so that there's enough time in between that so that if you have questions or you want us to come back with more information, we have time to actually do that before your decision.
Thank you.
Okay, we're ready for a vote? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Councilor Clark?
Aye.
Okay, that's 8 in favor, none opposed. Thank you. Okay, do I have to do this again?
No, you're.
No.
Anything else in the queue that's become the issue?
No, that was it. That was the whole list
Oh, the council.
of the counselors. No, done. Okay. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a hearing for an ordinance concerning the rental housing code. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. This is an opportunity for the public to provide feedback on the rental housing ordinance that adds language to the rental housing code to address carbon monoxide alarms, electrical systems, appliances, and rats. The proposed ordinance removes the sunset clause and adds language requiring the city manager review the rental housing code and report to city council every 3 years. Council is tentatively scheduled for action on January 23rd.
Thank you. And first to speak before us, Janet Ayers, followed by John Thielking. Oh, do I have to open it? Wait.
Yeah, open the public hearing.
Wait, is that this?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. This public hearing is open. Janet?
I'm here to give my testimony. I have a small single unit, and I feel that this rental housing code is unnecessary, and it's owner occupied. I don't have a problem with mega units that are owned by owners out of state. I think that it compels for a code like this. But I'm here to give my testimony that I would like to see it abolished altogether. And short of that, for property owners much like myself with 2 units or less, larger units with the owners out of state or unavailable should probably have something like this as a form of enforcement. So my testimony is this: I'd like to see it abolished for people like myself, property owners that have 2 units or less. And short of that, I would like to see the sunset. If that's not an option, I'd like to see the sunset rule stay in place to keep the city council accountable for those monies that are, in my opinion, unfairly being levied on us. Thank you.
Thank you. John Thielking, followed by Chris Wigg.
Hello, my name is John Thielking. I live in Ward 1, Emily Simple's ward. I'd like to, first of all, congratulate Emily Simple on being here, because I voted for her. Second thing is, I got this flyer from, I guess it's one of the landlords who wrote this guest viewpoint in the Register Guard about saying the so-called feel-good housing code is unnecessary. But I guess sometimes it's helpful to listen to your opposition to find out points that you want to explain why you should keep something when they want to get rid of it. He says that there were 24 complaints, I guess that's last year, 15 inspections, 10 corrections, and 1 fine, which indicates to me that there's actually a use for this particular ordinance, since maybe people were ignorant of the state law that he mentions, but I think it's rather probably costs more money for the state government to come down to Eugene from Salem and enforce their particular state law rather than have it enforced locally. So as far as cost goes, I think it's probably better for a local ordinance to be in effect. And I don't look forward to having to look up on my computer some ordinance in the state law in order to make sure that there's not raw sewage going through my living room or rats or whatever this ordinance is designed to enforce. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Wigg, followed by Art Bowman.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councilors. My name is Chris Wigg. I live in the downtown neighborhood in Ward 1. Emily Semple is my city councilor. And for 8 of the 9 of you, I serve as the chair of your party. I also serve as a member of the city's Rental Housing Code Advisory Committee. And so I wanted to talk just a little bit about what that committee does and kind of head off of the past, one of the most onerously dishonest arguments against the Rental Housing Code. The facts and changes in the ordinance, most of them were approved by this committee of landlord advocates and tenant advocates unanimously, that we all got together and agreed that these are places, electrical safety, rats, these are things that make sense to include in the code, that it doesn't make sense to have heating going out in the winter and having a 10-day complaint process, that we need to shorten that down to 2 days. The committee agreed to not make a recommendation about the sunset clause, and I'm glad that the city manager and city staff have decided to take that out. The last thing is that we hear that this code is onerous because it is costly. It costs $10 per unit per year. That works out to 83 cents per month. If you have roommates, you can subdivide that further and you can see where I'm going with that. That this is not a costly program, and it's a program that helps people. And so you're going to hear from a lot of folks tonight who have been helped or may be helped in the future, and I hope that you heed their calls and vote yes on this ordinance next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Art Bowman, followed by Celine Swenson-Harris.
Art Bowman, third in a row from the 1st Ward. I've been looking at some of the literature, and Mr. Wigg is correct. 83 cents a month isn't going to make any landlord go bankrupt or cause anyone to be evicted from their apartment. But I seem to have the impression that there is this money just sitting in a fund. And I was wondering if maybe you had thought about some creative ways to use the money in ways that would benefit landlords like Miss Ayers and their tenants. One thing that occurs to me is that you might want to explore having a low and no cost fund to provide loans for landlords, many of whom are struggling economically to do needed repairs to their properties, and maybe expand it. I'm not sure, this just occurred to me, but if that money's there, you might want to start with something slow, like maybe no interest loans to landlords who might need money to repair their sidewalks or something like that, and see if it works. Because if the money's sitting there, you should use it in a way that benefits the people who are paying into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Celine Swenson-Harris, followed by Bill Sirius.
Hello, my name is Celine Swenson-Harris. I live in Ward 1, and I'm here today because I want to tell you a little bit about what having the Rental Housing Advisory Code means to me as a young person and as a tenant. As somebody who recently graduated from the University of Oregon and lives here in Eugene, one of the single biggest expenses in my life is paying for the space that I rent. And it's incredibly important to me that my home be someplace that has a basic standard of comfort and livability. This means things like having functioning smoke detectors, having certain basic standards of heating, running water, structural integrity. I think things that we can all agree are essential to having a house that's fit to live in. And for me, having the Rental Housing Advisory Code means that if there's a problem with my home, if it doesn't meet the standards that I need to be able to safely live there, there is a way for me to seek a solution to that, and a way to seek a solution to that that's affordable. Because for me as a young person, I don't really have the money to pursue a legal case in order to make sure that my home meets the standards set in Oregon law. I think for a lot of students and recent graduates, this is true. And that's why I think it is so important to have this program where we are able to seek a remedy to a problem without having to file a lawsuit. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Sirius, followed by Cliff Gray.
Yes, thank you. I'm Bill Sirius. Appreciate the opportunity to talk before the council. I don't know how many of you are numbers people, and some of us are and some of us aren't. I know I am not a numbers person. It's just not in my makeup. I can spell math, but I'm not sure I can spell arithmetic. But when I saw in the Register Guard article the numbers associated with the housing code, I became a numbers person. Because when you look down deep into it and you analyze the numbers in terms of on an annual basis, and that's what I've done on this, and some folks in the audience also have this, you'll see on this graph that every year there's been 1,000 calls in, 500 of which are from landlords asking how to pay for this. They're $10 per unit. The other 500 are from tenants. Of that 500, we can just go down the list here, 24 complaints. Of those 24 complaints, there's 15 inspections. Of those 15 inspections, there's 10 corrections. And of those 10 corrections, there was one fine levied every year. This was in the study that you as a council instituted for a 3-year study. So that means that for every complaint costs $12,500, every inspection is $20,000, and every order of correction it's $30,000, and for every fine it was $300,000. Now, if you're a family thinking about being good steward of your budget, or if you're a company, you would look at that and you'd say, there's no way I would continue that kind of program given those numbers. And as the family that is the city, is the good stewards of the city's money, I would hope that you would think in the same fashion and be business people for the city. Because it just doesn't feel like it's responsible fiscally to keep this going. And it takes courage, more courage to stop a program like this than to keep it going. It takes courage because this seems like a really good thing for people who need it. But there are, if you look at the very bottom of this, there are at least 3 other options that tenants have to keep landlords accountable. And surely they need those options, but they're already existing. And this program just simply taxes everybody who's involved with housing, landlords, tenants, homeowners. It really is a tax. And what is it there for? How effective is it? I've never written an editorial until this hit me from the Register Guard, and I had to respond to it. So in the bottom there is the editorial I wrote. If nothing else, please, at the minimum, leave the sunset clause in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Cliff Gray, followed by Scott Smith.
Cliff Gray, Ward 7. About what the gentleman said before, $10 per unit per year. I mean, the problem with the underutilized rental housing code is that tenants don't know about it. landlords get the bill, but they don't get no requirement to inform their tenants of the existence of the program. And equally, I kind of fault the city's own website for not having a connection, because I've done a novice check to look for rent board or anything to do with rent and came up with nothing on the website. You need to somehow provide a decent link using a variety of available words to bring that up so residents, the tenant that rent, can find that code. Now, the other thing I'm going to deal with here is cost. We have the highest rent to property value ratio probably in all the western states. Now, what does that mean? I come from the Bay Area. I moved up. I've lived there for 50 years. And I know that if there's a guy there who owns a 10-unit apartment building and gets a reasonable rate of return, 15%, 10%, something like that, if he knew that he could sell his property, come up here, and with that money buy 5 identical properties of 10 units each, charge half the rent that he charged in the Bay Area, he would gain 150% return on his investment. So rentals here are enormously profitable. So the cost issue is not at all. The real issue behind the Rental Housing Board is enforcement. They want to remove the ability of tenants to get redemption. In other words, they have to go seek a lawyer if this rental code disappears. And who in hell can afford a lawyer and all the time it takes to get something repaired on his property? So absolutely, I don't even think there's a threat to the sunset idea. I think it should be removed. But, and then the cost passed to where it belongs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Scott Smith, followed by Bill Aspegren.
Good evening. My name is Scott Smith. I'm from Ward 5. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I really believe that the sunset clause needs to be kept in because there's never been a case made that this program offers a reasonable cost-benefit ratio to citizens and taxpayers, as previous speakers have pointed out. It's $10 per unit does not sound like a lot of money, but it's real money, and people are writing checks for that. Years ago, when this program was first proposed, the council was told about a great pent-up need for this code and further protection for tenants above and beyond what already exists at the state level. That has been proven to be vastly overstated from reality, just based on the level of usage of the program. Staff spends as much billable hours maintaining the funding mechanism as they do actually doing the mission of the program. And many people, like myself, continue to feel like the program is a solution in search of a problem. Until such time that proponents of the program can show that the program offers a benefit to a significant segment of the citizens of Eugene and commensurate with the cost of the program, I believe strongly that the sunset clause should remain a part of the ordinance. Regarding additions of appliances to the code, further requirements for landlords to maintain appliances above and beyond what the state ORS already requires may cause some landlords to consider removing the appliances in the case of stoves or refrigerators, which would force tenants to acquire their own. Rental supply is tight right now, and landlords may likely be able to do that at this time and continue to rent their units. And I think it's important that the council consider whether that's an outcome that they would want. improving the quality of housing stock is a laudable goal, and that's what I understand this program is about. But we currently have a housing supply problem. The first rung of the ladder of tenants needs shelter. Small spaces, garages, basements, substandard spaces at low cost are better than icy sidewalks and park strips where I observe people sleeping in sleeping bags and tents. Potential landlords cannot legally rent such spaces to willing tenants. The rental housing code serves to further decrease the supply of available housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Aspergren, followed by Brett Rowlett.
I'm Bill Aspergren, still Bill Aspergren, and I still live in Ward 3. I'm not a landlord or a renter. I fully support the proposed changes to the rental property code, including the removal of the sunset date and inclusion of the periodic review process. The sunset clause only generates false hope that the program will be eliminated, and the review will provide an opportunity to make changes to the code. In 2004, when this code was first proposed, it was targeted at student housing, but was available to all city residents, tenants. Therefore, the benefit extends to protect the entire community. It's not just the students. It has been argued that the rental property code is a duplicate of the state landlord-tenant code. Realistically, to use the state law, you need to have an attorney and you may have to go to court. With 45 to 55% of our population, or the household, spending more than 30% of their income on housing, few people will have enough funds to hire an attorney. Eugene's code provides a tool for renters that they can resolve their problems without having to incur the expense of hiring an attorney or getting a court order. In addition, the state's process is not particularly timely. The cost to solve a problem seems high. However, there's a hidden intangible benefit. Just the fact that Eugene has a rental code is motivation for landlords to keep their properties up to safe standards, thus improving the livability of the entire community. The rental program has accumulated a sizable surplus funds over the years. None of the renters I have talked to know about this program. Some of the portion of the surplus should be used to make tenants aware of the program. With more awareness, there may be more problems reported, I don't know, and the surplus could act as a cushion to absorb that cost. As a suggestion, the city could provide a lease addendum that explains the program and how to use it. Renters would sign a copy of the addendum for the landlord and retain a copy with their lease. In closing, I just encourage the council to pass the changes as proposed, and I think there's benefits to this beyond what the dollars and cents show. I think it's a good program for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Brett Rowlett, followed by Dennis Cassidy.
Hi. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Brett Rowlett. I'm a resident of Ward 2, Councilor Taylor's ward. In 2004, I was one of the organizers that helped organize the movement to ask the council to bring back housing standards in Eugene. We went roughly 2 decades without having locally enforceable housing standards, and we went door to door, knocked on about 2,000 to 3,000 rental properties around Eugene, and for a year and a half brought case after case before the council as to why it's important to have a locally enforceable code. I guess I'll start with why is it important? Why doesn't the Salem option, why doesn't the courts work all of the time? Well, first of all, a lot of renters don't have the experience. They don't have the experience to go out and get an attorney. Most can't afford to go out and get an attorney. And oftentimes they're going up against entities that are very well experienced with the court system. Back in 2003, the state of Oregon was in a recession. That's not an uncommon occurrence in our state. One of the things that resulted in that recession was our courts went to 4 days a week. And when that happened, they prioritized the court cases. Tenant cases, those that tenants had issues with landlords, were prioritized at the bottom. There were about 20 cases. Evictions were given top priority. So if you were a tenant, you often had to wait 4 to 6 months in order to get your case before a judge. If you were a landlord, you were able to get in right away. That was a huge flaw in the system. The courts are not always on the side of the renters. And so we needed some local protection for people that rented in Eugene. We looked at over 75 cities across the country, and we tried to find a system that would work best for our community. We wanted something that would be funded and was sustainable on its own, something that would be fee-based. We didn't want a system where the city went out looking to shut down rental housing. We wanted a system that encouraged tenants and landlords to work together. And I think that's what we found. We found a great program. You know, I'm a property owner now. I was a renter at the time. Now I'm a property owner. I have renters that live next door to me. And as a property owner, I am grateful to the city of Eugene for having this program. When you protect your renters, you create stronger neighborhoods. Stronger neighborhoods don't just benefit renters, but they benefit the landowners. When you have a rundown property next to your home that an owner that lives in California isn't taking care of, that hurts both the renters that live there. It also hurts the property owners that are next door to it. And so as we went around town, we brought before the council case after case from every ward in the city showing a need for this program. I'd be happy to dig out all of the pages of research that we did back then and sit down with any of you that are interested. But one thing I want to close on, news last week, 63% of Americans right now are unable to deal with an unexpected expenditure of $500. We cannot afford to go to court to deal with this.
Thank you. Next is Eric Hall, followed by Brian Weaver. Oh, did I skip Dennis? I'm sorry. Dennis, apologies.
Thank you. Mayor, Council, City Manager. My name is Dennis Cassidy. I'm a lifelong resident of Eugene and a property owner and manager of my own properties for now 45 years next month in February. I'm currently Vice President of the Rental Owners Association of Lane County, the largest of 14 chapters in the state, of which we have 1,045 members representing almost 15,000 members, or rental units. Tonight I'm speaking on behalf of our membership when I ask you to keep the sunset clause as part of the ordinance. The sunset clause is the only tool that we have that forces the city of Eugene to continue showing the citizens that the rental housing code is a necessity in spite of the fact that it is duplication of Oregon landlord-tenant law. Initially, the $10 per unit per year was going into the general fund. We lobbied and we were successful in getting that those collected funds or fees into a designated fund, and therefore we're able to track the funds and now see a surplus nearing $300,000. At one point years ago, the police department wanted to use the money to help police the West University neighborhood, and I stood up and stated that that money was for one purpose and one purpose only, and that was to administer the rental housing code. It was not a slush fund for other city departments to be using. I respect Pete Kearns, but I know he's only trying to do his job. But that money is there for a reason. These fees only contribute to the ever-climbing costs of housing in Eugene as landlords pass these costs on. Portland State University predicts Eugene's population to grow approximately 40,000 people in the next 20 years. With the additional units to be built, many of those will be rentals. At $10 per unit per year, that $300,000 surplus is only going to get larger. Lane County Housing Authority and St. Vincent de Paul both have rental properties and are exempt from paying the annual fee. Our board of directors include a representative from each of these bodies. We offer classes and seminars to educate property managers and landlords to help them and guide them and offer hours of continuing education. We have to wonder how it is that the Rental Owners Association is not exempt from these fees. The main purpose of the Rental Owners Association is to educate our membership in landlord-tenant law and to teach them to be good landlords. In ending, we would prefer to see the rental housing code abolished, but at the very least, please retain the sunset clause. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Eric Hall, followed by Brian Weaver.
Eric Hall. I work at 116 Highway 99, and I am in Ward 7. I was going to offer a few words with regard to the City Hall, but given some of the comments that have been made tonight, I think I'd rather address my comments more specifically. I was a member of the subcommittee that made the recommendations to the Housing Policy Board, which some of the changed code language is based on. I was involved in meetings that ran for almost 2 years, in which a host of things were discussed, and our report was a consensus document between the tenants and landlord representatives that made up that committee. And yet somehow our recommendations have failed to translate to the code language under consideration tonight. This committee was told early on that any reductions in this code were politically infeasible, I think was the word that was used. And so landlord representatives were encouraged to focus on minor additional items that might quell the need for increasing the code. Additionally, while there are 3 codes, not just the landlord-tenant law, but also building code elements that are actually would regulate many of the egregious things that the code currently covers, raising an issue is not nearly as onerous as many tonight have provided testimony with regard to. It doesn't involve hiring a lawyer. It involves making a call, and making a call to the same place that they're currently making a call, which is to the City of Eugene and their complaint process. There will still be people there that will answer the phone because they're already answering the phone with regard to other elements of building code noncompliance. And most of the elements that are currently in the rental housing code are covered under those pieces. This program continues to be expensive and I would argue an excessive burden on the tenants of Eugene that pay for it, and that is who pays for it. I know there's been some confusion about that in the past. Its costs per actual incident remain excessively high, and as an architect, I can state that there are any number of firms, architects and engineers, that would gladly write findings and follow up for 1/3 to 1/2 the costs that this program involves on an incident-by-incident basis. While that fact is not the discussion tonight, it remains the primary reason to continue to actively monitor this program by the citizenry and to force this council to revisit this costly abuse of tenants' wallets. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Brian Weaver, followed by Devin Gates, I guess.
Good evening, councilors. Brian Weaver, Ward 1. I'd like to first off dispel the myth that it requires an attorney to file a complaint, a state complaint. It doesn't, okay? And nor does somebody come down from the state, a state rep. They don't come down from Salem. I'm sure there's an office in Eugene that can take care of the complaint. Also, disgruntled tenant could file a state complaint as well as a complaint with the city. So you have 2 agencies, 2 government agencies working on the same complaint. That's always a possibility. That's a waste of manpower. And to rationalize this into an 83-cent per month fee, that's just rationalizing. I ran the numbers here real quickly. This is off the Register Guard article. There's 35,000 rentals in Eugene, and at $10 per rental, that's $350,000 per year. Okay, and then to log in a call, I'm sure you've read it, $285. That's just to log a call, I guess, to answer the phone, all right? And then to record a complaint, this is what it says, $12,500. And then to issue an order to correct is $30,000. So I added those 3 figures up, and I got almost $43,000. Okay, if you take that, you divide it into the annual fee the annual amount this fee generates. You divide 43,000 into 350,000. Well, that comes out to about 8. So it's not a huge amount of complaints, and it almost, here's the graph that was circulating earlier. This fella came up with 10 corrections, so it's pretty close. So evidently the landlords are doing a pretty good job here in Eugene. It seems like I don't see where this is such a big problem. I have one rental next to me. You know, her predecessor was there for about 10 years. He was so happy. It's very affordable, 800 square feet. And if he needed a light bulb, I'd go over and put a light bulb in for him. You know, I wasn't worried about him buying one. I'd provide it, go put it in, and be done with it. And as far as the rats goes, I've never experienced any kind of rats on my property. About every other year, I might have a mouse, and I get out a Victor trap and trap him, and that's it. It's done. So, yeah, I've heard these compost piles outside are big draws for rats. So, and also I keep my appliances up. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Devin Gates or Crates? Gates, thank you. And following will be David Ivan.
Hi, my name's Devin Gates. I'm here not to talk about the redundant program, the mirroring of the state code, nor the exceptional cost and complaint. My biggest concern is the fast-track elimination of the sunset. I understand the code's here, and it's probably going to remain here, but I want to be pragmatic about this. And, you know, what the sunset does is it forces a review process. Well, that's smart policy. What's wrong with maintaining accountability and continued review? That's how we create better policies. And let's face it, the role of government is to create an even playing field. What that means is not one group is considered more than another. Now, we can qualify this program as it's only 83 cents per month. But how many far-reaching taxation programs start out this way, even though well-intentioned? Now, once again, I understand the code's here, but what we're asking for, what I'm asking for, is the maintenance of the sunset clause. We're not asking for the abolishment, at least I'm not asking for the abolishment of the code, even though I'm not necessarily a fan, just keeping the review process intact. One thing I want to leave here is, should elimination of the sunset alone occur, it would be proof that Eugene's intention is to force or flex its expanding doctrine without regard to all of its citizenry. And that being said, I'm just asking you guys to be accountable and be considerate of all citizenry. So I leave with the question, who do you serve? Thank you.
Thank you. David Piccioni, followed by Beverly Lair.
Hi, how are you? Congratulations, Emily. I'm a little confused about this whole thing, but I know that if you take care of the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. So what I can figure about this $10 stuff, that does amount like they were saying, like $350,000. I think that money could well be used for, okay, now, I want renters to be able to have pets in their apartments. So if the pets cause any damage, the damage should be half paid by the tenants and half by that fund that we have. So it hopefully shouldn't be that much damage and the pets should be neutered. So I had a lady friend that had a few pet rats, and the whole apartment filled with rats because they kept reproducing and everything. Another thing that the money can be used for, the $10 slush fund, is increasing vegetation in the yards. I mean, plants are beautiful. That's what makes Eugene beautiful. And we just lost a lot of trees when the frost broke all the branches. So we need to replant some trees. So I'm not in favor of of sunsetting this law. And I do want to express my appreciation for my landlord, who's been very kind to me, and I hope everybody is as lucky as I am in that department. Thank you.
Thank you. Beverly Lair, followed by Marshall Wilde.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Beverly Lair. My husband and I and our son have an LLC which owns 8 duplexes, and I manage the properties. We've owned rentals since 1978, and during that time we've never had a complaint from a tenant for any of the habitability issues, neither before nor after this program was implemented. I believe the program should not be renewed. It may have seemed like a good idea when it was implemented, but it hasn't lived up to its expectations. As was pointed out in an earlier hearing, the program's not cost-effective. A minimal number of owners are responsible for the small number of complaints received by the program, and there are other recourses for tenants who don't think their landlord is complying with the law. There have been some other comments about other uses for the money. This is, we get the money and now we figure out what to do with it. I think if it is retained, then that money has to be used in a way that it was intended for. If we're accumulating this excess, then probably the $10 fee is too much, and that could be reduced. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Marshall Wilde, followed by Norton Cabell.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. I'm Marty Wilde from Ward 2. I support the amendments and endorse the report of the Oversight Board. I want to point out a couple of things from the report. The program takes 500 to 1,000 calls a year, but only results in 24 formal complaints. That's a lot of conflict resolution. They're successful in resolving or answering questions 95 to 98% of the time. A big benefit is increased understanding of the responsibilities on both sides of the landlord-tenant equation. I think that's what they're getting out of it. Personally, I think conflict resolution is one of the highest functions of government. It reduces coercive actions and, frankly, makes everybody happier. I understand there is some concern about a surplus that's built up over time. If the surplus is too high, we can simply spend it down by temporarily reducing the $10 a year. There are other things we could do that fit within the program scope. That could include funding landlord-tenant mediation to further reduce conflicts and reduce the costs of resolving these complaints, or it could involve advertising the program to tenants better so that they know that there is a source where they can resolve their complaints with landlords. I urge you to vote yes on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Norton Cabell, followed by James Barber.
Mayor Venice, members of the council, my name is Norton Cabell. I live in Ward 1. I'm both a landlord and a tenant. While as a tenant, having a professional and responsible landlord, unlike some, I don't begrudge the $10, less than 0.1% of the rent I pay, going to help those whose landlords don't do what is required of them. Most landlords are professional and respectful of their tenants, their customers. But the operative word is most. Some landlords don't. I know a few. I suspect the other landlords who testified tonight know a few as well. As a tenant, I'm delighted that we have local enforcement mechanisms to help those tenants with those abusive landlords. As a landlord, and I bought my first rental property over 40 years ago, I also support the rental housing code and ending the sunset. Many landlords, not all, support continuing the sunset, but that's because they object to the rental housing code itself. Sunsets are designed to force review of new programs to see if they're working. Many landlords argue it isn't working. It's unnecessary, too expensive, duplicative. I'll get to all that. But we have over a dozen years of experience. If you believe it's working, the sunset is unnecessary. As a landlord, I understand the provisions of the code are duplicative of state landlord-tenant law, with one important exception. The local code provides an enforcement mechanism that's absent in state law. As a landlord, I recognize that only a few tenants benefit directly from the rental housing code. I don't, my tenants don't, but I don't directly benefit from taxes that fund schools, Cahoots, the Amazon pool, but I recognize they're all important assets of the city, as is the rental housing code. And those tenants who directly benefit consider it terribly valuable. I also recognize that the program is expensive. That's mostly due to the funding source. Collecting fees or taxes in $10 increments just cannot be cheap. Were that there were a better funding mechanism, but that's what we're stuck with at the moment. Eugene has a rental housing code. I'm a landlord. I don't want the program to go away. Ours is effective. For landlords, it's cheaper and less intrusive than those in any other Oregon cities that have a housing code. For some tenants, it's a lifeline. I encourage you to approve the ordinance as proposed by the city manager. Thank you.
Thank you. James Barber, followed by Matt Johnson.
Thank you. My name is James Barber. I'm a realtor here in Eugene. I'm sure the landlords that we have here today are upstanding citizens who care deeply for their tenants' rights and take care of necessary repairs and safety issues with little to no prodding. My concern is more for absentee landlords. The number of absentee landlords has increased substantially in the last few years. Since the crash of 2008, many people lost their homes, leaving hedge funds and other Wall Street entities with houses that they were never equipped to own or manage. This is just one instance of why the number of absentee landlords is increasing. There's many more. The fact is, some renters have issues with landlords. This code is in place because a previous group of concerned citizens and a majority of city councilors saw a real problem and addressed it. I thank the previous speaker for educating us on some of those reasons. In my mind, the small number of corrections doesn't necessarily speak to a code that is not needed, but rather the effectiveness of the code as it was enacted. Pointing to a small number of infractions as a reason to abolish a code is why the Voting Rights Act was extremely weakened by the Supreme Court recently, leading to an immediate increase in the number of voting rights violations that were previously addressed by the code. My concern is that if this code was not renewed, we would see an increase in violations, possibly severe violations that could endanger the lives of some of our most vulnerable citizens. Some of the recent violations addressed dealt with mold, heat, and electricity. These are not trivial issues. $10 per year is a small price to pay for greater protections for renters, and I have yet to hear a renter come before the council asking for less protections for their living conditions in order to save 83 cents a month. I've heard some really good arguments tonight about how keeping the sunset clause is important for review, accountability, and to hear from citizens about why it exists and continue, so we don't forget about why it came about to begin with. However, the sunset clause puts the impetus on a vulnerable population to continually make a case for a program that has a proven need. So I support the extension of it permanently. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Matt Johnson, followed by Tony McCown.
Good evening. My name is Matt Johnson. I've been a landlord here in Eugene for over 30 years. I spoke against this measure that was passed in 2004, 2005, and since then my company has paid $38,000 to this program. Not one time has the enforcement folks been to my property because we're landlords, we're not slumlords, and I think there's a difference there, and that's what you ought to focus on. Find those folks and deal with them. This is a redundant policy that you have. It's just a duplication of existing state, county, and city ordinances that we have to abide by. In order to be in business, I have to deal with insurance companies. They come and inspect my property once a year. Mortgage companies come out and inspect my property once a year. The owners look at my property 3 or 4 times a year. And I think we do a pretty good job. And the tenant-landlord relationship is a great relationship. Again, I believe this is just a redundant, a duplicating effort. It's not necessary. And I would hope that you would keep the sunset law in place so that we can continue to look at this and see if it is actually necessary. It was a solution looking for a problem back in 2004, and it still hasn't found it. It's still looking. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony McCown, followed by Nathan Stevens.
Mayor Venice and City Council, thank you for taking the time tonight to hear the arguments in favor and against this, the amendments and the sunset clause. I was involved in the activism around this policy back in 2004. I spent a great amount of time on doors, going door to door, speaking with tenants and looking at their homes. The conditions we found some of those units in was deplorable. Now, as a facilities maintenance manager, I would not walk into some of those into some of those spaces, knowing the risk and danger that those folks face from mold and exposed electrical outlets and other issues. And that's really why we pushed. Those were the problems. This wasn't a solution looking for a problem. I walked into a home once where the bathtub was falling through the floor, and the floor was raised on the bottom level, and there was literally 4.5 to 5 feet clearance between the two spaces. There were a number of issues. I appreciate the great landlords that are here tonight. This policy, though, protects them as much as it protects the renters, because it assures renters their ability to get proper recourse and not simply step out on landlords when they're not getting what they need and getting their needs met in their housing. This just holds all landlords to the same standard, the standard that sounds like many of the landlords here tonight provide in their own units. I just wanted to reiterate my support of eliminating the sunset clause and the amendments as proposed. There are plenty of opportunities to review all city council ordinances, to review the budgets of all city programs. Setting one ordinance aside for continual sunset puts it at risk. I think that, we were able to find hundreds and hundreds of tenants back in 2004 and 5 that faced issues. Fortunately, today, there are fewer and fewer tenants that have those issues. I would worry that if we eliminate the ordinance, that those issues would start to pop up. We saw problems in units owned, by an owner who owned 1 or 2 units, and very large organizations that had specific policies against making some of these fixes. So I think that this policy forces people to address the issue before it even sees the city, or the city even takes a look at it, and I think that's a good thing in and of itself. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Nathan Stevens is next, followed by Kenneth Sergenko.
Good evening. My name is Nathan Stevens. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Oregon, and as a recent graduate, I can mostly speak to the student perspective on these protections, and these protections are a safety net. During my time at the University of Oregon, with the exception of 2 terms, I worked anywhere from 2 to 3 jobs while taking a full class load. And a lot of this came down to not just professional and career acceleration, but also because somewhere between 50 to 60% of my income usually went towards rent. And this is not a problem that I have just had. Many of my former roommates, many of my friends, colleagues have had this exact same thing happen to them when moving here to Eugene, or even getting out of their parents' houses and going into rental properties. And during my time renting here in Eugene, I've definitely had rent issues within my apartment. I've become somewhat of an expert at DIY toilet repair due to some of the issues I've had, because during certain times, during certain terms, I had been basically getting up at 8 in the morning, going to campus or work, and getting back at 10 at night and immediately sleeping. These are the sort of lives that some of us lead just because we do not have have the income, and we are also, due to some of the external forces outside of Eugene, forced to take internships that do not pay in order to, again, accelerate our professional careers. And with so many students juggling these different things at the same time, these protections are so vital, and the removal of them is rife for abuse. I know that there are amazing landlords out here. I've personally had some very, very negative interactions with landlords who I know would abuse this if it was repealed. So I urge the council and everyone here really to not only look into this, but make sure from at least a student perspective and the wider Eugene perspective that this is kept in place to protect the tenants of Eugene. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Kenneth Sergienko, followed by John Van Landingham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, councilors. Thanks to everyone for being here. I'm also here to add a little bit of the student perspective. But first, I'd like to address some of the things that have been said earlier and echo a little bit of what's already been said about this program. Namely, is that folks have been discussing the low level of complaints that have arisen from the program. But as I believe Mr. Wildy mentioned, the point of the program is to encourage conflict resolution. So the minimal number of complaints, that would probably resolve from that. And another question that I think has been missed in this is that perhaps the low number of complaints could result from the very real threat of retaliation by no-cause evictions. I'm a student. I've lived here for 3 years. I've had a fantastic experience doing so, but I've had several friends who have been no-cause evicted multiple times, and it's a real problem, and that could be another important reason for the low level of complaints. But with all that being said, I'd like to ask you all to support the continuation of this program without sunsetting it. It's important. We're talking about covering basic stuff here: structural integrity, smoke detectors, all that kind of stuff. For no matter how long people live in our community, whether they're just a student, whether they're here to stay. Indeed, 52% of Eugene are renters. Everybody, I think, deserves a good place to live that's sound and that they can appreciate our community to its fullest. Thank you.
Thank you. John Van Landingham, followed by Sean Shivers.
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. My name is John Van Landingham. I work as a lawyer with the Oregon Law Center. I want to note that I have a new name for my organization. On January 1, we merged with a statewide legal aid program, Oregon Law Center. Same work, same address, more resources, hopefully. I've been a legal aid lawyer doing landlord-tenant law, residential landlord-tenant law, representing low-income tenants in Lane County for almost 40 years. I've spent 25 years of that time negotiating and writing state landlord-tenant law. I believe I am the leading expert. It's a pretty small field on state landlord-tenant law. I can tell you, I can't resist telling you that emphatically, there is no state enforcement of state landlord-tenant law. There is no state complaint form. There is no state office that tenants can go to. The only enforcement, as Norton Capel pointed out, is what you have, the city of Gresham has, the city of Corvallis has. I've also been a member of the Housing Policy Board for 25 years, and I'm here tonight representing the Housing Policy Board in its recommendation. That's what you're considering, is a recommendation from the Housing Policy Board. And I've been a member of the Rental Housing Code Committee that you created 4 years ago. That committee consists of 7 folks, 4 landlords, 2 tenant advocates, including me, and 1 person from the Housing Authority. The committee spent considerable time reviewing how city staff enforces the code. We also spent considerable time considering additions to the code, some suggested by you all, members of the council, some as adopted by other cities, such as Corvallis. And we also recommended that the timeline for life safety issues be shortened. So instead of having 10 days, landlords would have 48 hours to respond to those more serious claims. We also recommended that the city manager review the fee. The Rental Housing Code Committee, that's not its responsibility, nor is it the responsibility of the Housing Policy Board. On the sunset, the Housing Policy Board recommends that you remove the sunset and make the ordinance permanent. Sunset we've had 4 sunsets already. This would be a 5th sunset if you adopt another one. 12 years you've had the code. In my opinion, Landlords argue for the sunset because they don't trust the city staff. I mentioned already that the Rental Housing Code Committee spent a lot of time looking at that very issue. We did not find any abuses. The city managers on the motion before you will come back to you every 3 years to report on how the code's doing, and the Housing Policy Board will retain oversight. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean Shivers? Shivers, thank you. Followed by Jerry Havenstein.
Hi, my name is Sean Shivers, and I got into Eugene 2 years ago after living in one of these terrible apartments, which I have not seen once since getting here. I credit your housing code for that. The landlord showed up here tonight because it affects our bottom line. That's why all of us showed up here too. It affects more than our bottom line. It affects our lives. It affects our jobs. It affects our careers. In a college town, I think you all see the need for a housing code. It's obvious to us. I assume it's obvious to you, which is why it's been renewed so many times already. The biggest complaint about this that I've heard over and over again tonight has been that it costs too much. But leaving the sunset code in, how much is it costing us to review it every 4 years? It's an absurd waste of time and resources. So I really encourage us all to keep the programs that work. We can review how much, perhaps reduce the fee for a limited amount of time, but landlords who don't want to provide a minimum standard of living shouldn't be responsible for providing a minimum standard of living. It's really just that simple. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jerry Hannenstein. How is it?
Howenstein.
Howenstein, thank you. And he'll be followed by Quinn Haugen.
I've been a landlord for over 20 years, and I've always maintained my properties. I have a property manager that informs me if there's any problems, and all of my tenants have my number in case they need something to be fixed. I once had a problem with a tenant some time ago, and I called the board to see if they had any suggestions or somebody else that I could contact or anything I could do. And they informed me that they don't help landlords at all. They only help tenants. So I'm wondering why I have to pay for something that I get absolutely no benefit from. I realize that this fee is really small and doesn't add up to that much, but over a period of time when you have a lot of rentals, it does make a difference. I understand that there are problems with the tenants and with the landlords when there is a problem, and these need to be addressed. I'm not a slumlord. I take care of my properties, and they are a major investment to me. What I propose is that when a tenant has a problem with their landlord or something that needs to be fixed and the landlord doesn't fix it, that they could contact the board and the board could act as a liaison between those two and try to resolve the problem. And if there is a problem, then the landlords who don't maintain their property could be fined. And I think these fines could be used for the administration of the board. You have a surplus of $263,000 that could help to implement this plan. And I think that the landlords that don't maintain their property should be penalized, but not the ones that do. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Quinn Haugen. Is Quinn still here? In that case, oh, you are there. Okay, there we go.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. My name is Quinn Haga, and I'm the ASUO president, so the student body president at the University of Oregon.
And hi, I'm just here for support. I'm Natalie Fisher. I'm the ASUO's vice president.
So we're here to speak on behalf of the student body because students obviously make up a large portion of the renter population in the city of Eugene. I live in the West University neighborhood, which I believe is about 91% renters, and about 70% of that is actually student renters. And we believe that there are approximately 10,000 student renters in the city of Eugene. So this ordinance is obviously something that is greatly affecting our student population. The current code provides renters with a very efficient process in which to report their issues to their property owners. And most property owners are very swift at addressing these issues, but that's not true for all. And many rentals that students live in have some really dangerous defects that really do need immediate action without financial consequence to the student renters. And the ordinance has been renewed, I read today, a few times in the past. So I urge you all to reapprove it this upcoming week and to abolish the sunset clause as well so that it's permanent. Thank you.
Thank you. And that closes this public hearing.
May I get in the queue, Mayor?
Yes, you may. So first, oh, Betty, thank you. Do we need any advice from council on this before we proceed in any way?
No, just a reminder that you are at the moment scheduled to take action next Monday, so this is a time for either comments or if there's information that you would like for your meeting when you take action, this would be a good time to ask those questions.
Okay, great. So first, Councilor Zelenka.
Yeah, thank you all for coming out this evening. I agree that most landlords, and the ones that I've had in town, do a very good job. But we don't enact laws for the people who already obey them. We enact laws for the people who don't. That's why this law is necessary. And it may be that because of the rental housing code, rental owners actually comply with the law and with the provisions of the rental housing code, and that's why we don't have as many issues and complaints and have a better stock of rentals. I think it is very affordable. Taking the math to the next step, it's less than 3 cents a day, if you want to think about it that way. I think the rental housing code should be expanded. I agree with the additions of the CO monitors, RATs, working electrical appliances and electrical systems, and that we should shorten the repair time for essential services of the home or apartment from 10 days to 2 days. Can you imagine during the last ice storm if you had to wait 10 days before your heat was fixed? I think that would be pretty outrageous. So 2 days seems like an appropriate amount of time for me in this code. I think the sunset should be eliminated, but I would like to see us add language in here that calls for staff to do a review and report on how the program is working and have that come back to council for review before the end of every 5 years after the enactment of this code. It does also provide for a affordable, easy mechanism for people to seek a remedy. As John Van Landingham pointed out, there is no state agency that does that. It's up to us. There is a problem, though, with the program, and that is the utter lack of knowledge and awareness that there is about this program. I serve the area that surrounds the University of Oregon, so I have a lot of students that are in my ward, and it's surprising to me how few of them actually know about it. So one of the things I would like to be brought back for Monday's meeting is ideas for expanding the education, awareness, and outreach program, especially around, among students, and using some of that surplus money and draw that down over the next couple of years.
Great, thank you. Councilor Clark?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Manager, would you remind me, please, because I don't have the materials in front of me, I'm sorry to say, of the total budget for the program last year?
I'm having somebody come up and answer that for you.
Hi, I'm Lori Kivitz, Finance Director for Planning and Development, and the expense budget is approximately $300,000.
Was that the amount we expended, or was that the amount we collected? I'm looking for the difference in there if there was a surplus.
Both revenue and expenses is approximately $300,000, although the revenue has increased in the last couple of years, which has added to the balance available.
So that's an approximate number and not an exact number from last year. Is that correct?
That's approximate. Yeah, I could get the exact number if I ran back to my chair.
Would you? That's okay. That's all right. Would you say it's accurate? I've heard from both the information that you presented us previously and from some of the folks who testified and some of the information that's been available that approximately half the calls that come in are about billing, more or less. Would you say that's accurate?
I'm getting a nod from the program manager as to yes.
And so I guess my comment would be then that I would think it's reasonable to assume that perhaps half of the time staff spends on this might be around the issue of billing as well. And thus, if we didn't bill land owners and property owners for it and made it a part of city program, it would cost about $150,000. Do I have that right?
So, Councilor Zinka, this is Rochelle Nicholas, the program manager for the Rental Housing Code. And I guess I would just add that while there are quite a few tenant or property owners that call, a lot of those are calling because they prefer to pay their bill online. Through us, through credit cards. So they're calling with their credit card number. We've strongly encouraged them to pay online, and we've done some changes to that so that they can do that.
What I was saying was that the staff time being spent is approximately half towards the billing mechanism itself. And if we eliminated that and simply brought it in the budget, it would cost the city about $150,000.
I think what we'd want to do, Councilor Clark, is kind of get back to you on that information, and we can try to provide that for your meeting next week.
Thank you.
Councilor Taylor?
Thank you, Mayor. I was opposed to the sunset in the very beginning, and have become even more opposed to it, though I did enjoy the testimony about the rat reproduction. We wouldn't have had that without the sunset. I think I remember when this was started, and it was students mainly who asked us to do it, and as has been pointed out tonight, they worked really hard. They brought us evidence. They talked to us individually and as a group, and they don't get paid for watching, and the same students aren't here usually. I was glad to see that some of them who worked on this are still around, but usually they aren't here forever and they aren't getting paid to watch us. So I think it's too much to ask that the people who want to keep the code keep working on it, as that we need. And it takes, I think if we do have too much money, that's, as Councilor Zelinka has pointed out, many people don't even know about this. And we should probably spend some money educating people. We also could, if we have too much money, we could help people who are in danger of eviction. That we could change it to that, but I don't think this is a burden. The people I know who are landlords tell me that it's such a small amount of money, it's not worth complaining about. $10 per unit per year. If they were only charging $25 rent, it would be different. But I think we should, and I like the recommendations, the housing group, but I would like to add screens, because I do think screens are a matter of health too, especially during mosquito season. Thank you.
Councilor Polling?
Thank you. I'll start off with one question, and you may or may not have the information. Is do we know what the increase of rental units has been since the inception of this ordinance?
We can provide that also when we come back next week.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And then a question for Councilor Zelinka. In proposed section 5 of the amended ordinance, it's calling for a review every 3 years by the city manager. Do you want to change that from 3 to 5? Is that my understanding?
Yeah, the current one's 4. And I think that's a little bit too often, so yeah, 5.
All right. And then in section 4, it addresses the 48 hours from issuance of notice and order for repairs. I did not see anything in there covering exigent circumstances. Councilor Zelinka mentioned recent snow and ice storm and being without heat for several days. There are a lot of people that couldn't even get out and move, and try and call a tree trimmer or a plumber or something in the last couple of weeks and see what your response time is going to be. So is there some way to address that if a landlord is making a good faith effort to try and get the issue resolved, and for reasons beyond his or her control, they can't get the repairs done in the 48 hours? Is there something addressing that, or can we get something to address that?
I think we'll have to just take a look at it. I don't know how much work we put into that particular piece, but we can sure take a look at that.
Okay. And then there's been some discussion by the speakers as well as by some of my fellow councilors about having too much money reduce the fee. Solve that problem.
Well, as John Van Landingham talked about, is one of their recommendations was a review of the fee, which we will be doing. And then depending on what comes out of that review, it may or may not be appropriate to reduce the fee, and so we will be doing that work.
So will that be brought to us in either 3 or 5 years from now?
The fee is administratively set, and so we'd be happy to share all that information with the council at any time on how we would go about actually setting that fee. But that information can come back as part of the review in 3 to 5 years also.
Thank you.
Councilor Pryor?
Thank you. Yeah, I've actually mentioned at most of the meetings we've had on this rental code that I thought it was a good idea for the manager, which is what's within his authority, to review that fee and make sure it stays in balance with the expenses, taking into account, and this is my request for the work session, any sort of a projection or an idea of what an outreach effort might cost. Just tentatively, if we were to do an outreach effort to try to create greater awareness, I think everybody has agreed this needs greater awareness, but what in the ballpark might that cost? Because if there is available money to do other kinds of things within the context of rental housing, it would be nice to know what kind of funds would be available. You don't want it to just sit in a fund. You want it to go to work, and outreach is part of the work, and there may be other kinds of work. Also, something I heard that a lot of people talked about that I think is very important is the notion of accountability. I heard it over and over again. And interestingly, I'm not sure that keeping the sunset would really solve the accountability question that a lot of people are asking for, because technically speaking, the city council could put renewal of the housing code on the consent agenda and pass it without even discussing it. So that wouldn't really give the accountability, which is standing behind it, making sure it's working. That has to come through an actual review, and the review can occur whether we sunset it or not. And that's why I think it's extremely important that we build into this, as we're talking about, a specific review component. That's where the accountability work would occur, because you can't assume that just renewing a sunset has an automatic accountability element built in. I think, as you do, accountability is extremely important. And so I think we need to ensure that's what is actually put in this code is a review process that provides that level of accountability that we all want to see, and not just assume that we'll get that if there's a sunset there. The sunset is not the guarantee of accountability. Ensuring we have an actual review is the insurance of accountability. That's why it's very important that we have that element there. Whether it's 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years, it has to be there.
Okay. Councilor Temple.
I think that we should keep this sunset, because we're talking about changing this a bit. And so I think it would be appropriate to review if it's actually working to decide whether or not we keep it in a few years. We're proposing some changes, and there's arguments for and against. So I would like to keep the sunset.
Okay, I think missed anyone? All right, I think we're complete with that, and we can go on to our third agenda item. So the third public hearing is to discuss an ordinance allowing a new recreational marijuana facility to locate less than 1,000 feet from the Looking Glass New Roads School. So, Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. Glassroots, a business at 5th and Blair known as the Glass Menagerie, has requested the council take action that would allow the state to issue a recreational marijuana license at their location. State statute allows a marijuana business to be located closer than 1,000 feet to a school if exception criteria are met and the city passes an ordinance. Looking Glass New Road School is located on 7th Avenue, and their property line is closer than 1,000 feet to the Glassroots building when measured in a straight line. However, the door-to-door distance when measured along the pedestrian route is about 1,200 feet. This public hearing allows the opportunity for testimony on this proposed request.
And this public hearing is now open. The first person to present is Eric Chavez.
Hello, thank you. My name is Eric Chavez, and I am here on behalf of Glassroots LLC. We are a retail glass shop located at 980 West 5th in Ward 7, Councilor Saret's ward. We applied for a recreational cannabis license last February, and throughout this last year have been getting everything planned in accordance. In December, we were notified by the OLCC that somehow it had gotten missed, but that we were within 1,000 feet of a school. Upon further investigation, we found that through Senate Bill 1511, Section 29B, we actually were within the allowed allotments that were given for there to be exemptions granted. We have been in business there for 6 years. We believe we're in a very good location for a business of this sort. Most of the businesses around us are adult in nature, whether they're bars, breweries, restaurants, and such. Aside from that, one of the things that I would like to say on behalf of the store is we'd like to thank Councilor Saret for her prompt response. This came in quite literally our 11th hour. We had already bought everything in regards for the compliance of the store, and then we were told that basically the rug just got pulled out right from under us. We had requested a quick response from Councilor Saret because our application process expires February 1st. Come February 1st, if we don't have any sort of resolvement, anything to present to the OLCC, we have to start the process over and we forfeit our fee. It's not a very small fee, and we aren't a very large company, so it was something that we are really trying to stop before it happens. We understand that we wouldn't be the first dispensary or recreational store in the city of Eugene to get an exemption granted under Senate Bill 1511, and so we just request that the same examination of our case goes into the ones that went into that other store as well. And we're just appreciative that you guys even gave us such a quick notice to be able to come here and speak on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you. And Janet Ayers. Is she still here? Oh, there she is.
Direct this to my council member, Claire. She doesn't call me back any longer. I am in the practice of walking my dogs every morning. I live in the Whitaker neighborhood. Well, I should say I used to live there before the bums have taken over. I am appalled at the City Council's resistance to allowing our police to do their job and representing the tax-paying citizens rather than being concerned with folks that are trashing our fair city. I'm hopeful that the city will get a clue as to how angry we are at putting up with this mess in the Whitaker neighborhood. I regret the day that they put all the revenue into the skate park, because it's become nothing. You talk about slumlord. City Council, you have to know you are the biggest slumlord. There should be a housing code put on the City Council and their policy in allowing our fair city to be trashed the way it is. So my testimony is that, and I'm opposed to any more marijuana stations being put in the Whitaker neighborhood. We have enough with illegal campers, criminal activity, drug activity, and our fair park system. The poor park employees become den mothers, mopping up after trashy people. Please, please, City Council, get a clue as to how angry tax-paying citizens of Eugene are becoming at your refusal to address the problem. No courthouse for the city. You take that money, you go in a tent, you go live in the skate park, you put that money into these safe spot camps and give these folks a year or two to get their act together or move them out. It's not up to me. It's not my fault for other people's situation, but I'm not opposed to the city taking that court money, which is gone on steroids, and put it more into these safe spots so there's a proper place for these people to be in and a proper plan for these people to get it together. Thank you.
Thank you. And that closes the testimony and comments from councilors. Councilor Surratt?
Yes, well, I definitely owe Janet a phone call, and it's not because I haven't wanted to call you back. I just haven't had the opportunity, and I appreciate your concerns and your comments. But they're actually a very separate issue from what the public hearing was about. And I really want to thank the city manager and city attorney for getting this on our agenda, because Glassroots business contacted me right as we went on council break. So we'd had our last meeting, I got their email, and recognizing that they were at risk of losing this investment as a local business who's been in the neighborhood, has been a good part of the neighborhood, I felt like it was important for us to try to take action. So it's very similar to the action we took for Terrapin Station on River Road. And in fact, this location is even more difficult to get to from the school at Looking Glass, because you have to go down the street, cross 6, cross Blair. So it's very unlikely the students at Looking Glass would even know that they were there just by arriving at the school. So I hope my fellow councilors will support this exemption for the Glassroots business in the Whitaker neighborhood. Thank you.
Councilor Polling?
Yeah, I was wondering if we could get an aerial view of the locations. You know, I could go on the Google map and find it, but it's not marked which one's which, and it's not real accurate as to which building you're standing in front of. So whenever we get anything like that, just an aerial view of it would help kind of determine better the barriers that they're speaking of in order to get from the school to the business.
Councilor Semple?
I did look at this on the map, and I think there's a really big difference between the way the crow flies and the way you'd have to walk to this business, and I support letting them go forward.
Any other comments? Any instructions from council on this? No.
We'll be back on your agenda next Monday for possible action.
Okay, I think we are finished and the meeting is adjourned.